The wheel cracked before the sun had even reached its highest, the splintering snap echoing off the red ridge like a gunshot. The wagon lurched, threw dust into her eyes, and came to a groaning halt in the middle of the empty road. Eleanor Vance gripped the seat to keep from falling, her knuckles white through the worn black gloves. The horse stamped nervously, tail flicking at flies, as heat shimmered over the land like glass. Her breath came shallow, the sound of a woman who'd been silent too long. She climbed down, skirts brushing the dry earth, and crouched to look at the wheel. Split clean through. The right axle hung loose, mocking her with its uselessness. She pressed her palm against the cracked wood, the heat burning her skin. There was no sound but the creak of the saddle leather and the soft whine of wind sliding through sagebrush. No birds, no voices, just exile silence. She straightened, looked back the way she'd come. The road stretched like a faded ribbon, vanishing into haze. No sign of the men who'd sent her here, her husband's brothers, their faces still etched in her mind. The eldest had spoken for all of them. "You brought shame, Eleanor. He's dead because of you. Be grateful we're sending you anywhere at all." She had not begged. She had only nodded, climbed into the wagon, and left without a word. Now the punishment had stopped moving, and the sun showed no mercy. A faint rumble rose in the distance, low, steady, growing stronger. Eleanor shaded her eyes. A rider approached from the ridge, the shape dark against the glare. The sound of hooves beat slow, measured, like a heartbeat that had learned patience the hard way. The man came into view, tall, shoulders wide, hat pulled low. His horse was a dusty roan, muscles gleaming under sweat. He rode close without speaking, reined in, and surveyed the broken wheel. Eleanor felt the urge to speak, but didn't. Something about him, the way he moved, the way his shadow fell long and straight, made words feel unnecessary. He dismounted, crouched by the wheel, and tapped the brake with a callous thumb. "Axle's gone," he said, voice low, like gravel dragged across wood. "I gathered that much," she answered, keeping her tone even. He glanced up at her, eyes pale, unreadable beneath the brim. "You headed for the Kerrigan place?" The question settled in the air like dust. She hesitated, then nodded. He turned back to the wheel. "Then you're already here." Eleanor blinked. "You're Luke Kerrigan," he said simply, pulling a knife from his belt to cut a strip of leather. "Heard you were coming." He didn't sound pleased. He didn't sound angry either. Just certain, like a man used to accepting what the world handed him, no matter how bitter the taste. Eleanor swallowed. "They didn't tell me what kind of place." "Ranch is 3 miles west," he interrupted. "I'll fix the wheel enough to get you there." He worked without asking for help. The knife sliced leather clean, his movements deliberate. She watched his hands, scarred, steady, quiet. The air hung thick with heat and something heavier, the weight of 2 people who'd been alone too long. When the wheel finally held, he stood, dusting his palms. "It'll ride slow, but it'll ride." She nodded, climbing back to the seat. The wood creaked beneath her, the black fabric of her dress catching the light like cold dust. He mounted his horse and motioned for her to follow. They rode in silence. The land opened wide around them, brittle grass whispering under the wind, the faint line of a river carving silver through the plain. The sun bled toward the west, painting the ridge in gold and rust. After a while, she spoke. "You live out here alone?" "Been that way a while," he said. "No one else?" He shook his head. "Don't much take to company." The conversation died like a candle in wind. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk had begun to settle. The place stood quiet, a small house, a barn slumped to one side, fences stretching out into the open. A single cross stood on the hill behind it, half lit by sunset. Eleanor's breath caught before she could stop it. Luke followed her gaze, but said nothing. He led her horse to the corral, unhitched it, and began unloading the wagon. "You'll take the spare room," he said. "Ain't much, but it's clean." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and smoke. A Bible rested on the table, pages curled from heat. Everything was neat, almost too neat, like someone had tried to keep time from touching it. He set her trunk by the wall and turned toward the door. "I'll be out at the barn." "Wait." she said before she could help herself. He paused, hand on the frame. Why'd you agree to take me? He looked at her, and for a second, something flickered in his eyes, something old, maybe sorrow, maybe recognition. Owed a favor, he said finally. Didn't ask what for. Then he left. Night fell fast, and with it came the cold. Eleanor lit a lamp and sat by the small window, watching the wind push dark clouds across the sky. Coyotes howled in the distance, sharp, lonely sound that felt too familiar. She tried to pray but couldn't find words that fit the world anymore. Her hand brushed the gold band still on her finger. It felt like a lie now. Out beyond the barn, a flash lit the horizon, not lightning. Gunfire. One shot, then another. Echoes rolled across the valley. Eleanor froze. The barn door opened, light spilling for a moment before it vanished again. She saw Luke's silhouette against the dark, standing still, listening. When the echoes died, he turned back toward the house. She met him at the door before he could knock. Was that? Outlaws, he said quietly. Happens sometimes. They try the ridge, then remember why they shouldn't. She stared at him. His voice hadn't changed, not an inch of fear in it. You didn't go after them? He looked past her, eyes distant. They'll find their own ghosts out there. Don't need mine. The lamplight caught a thin scar along his jaw. For a heartbeat, she saw something hard and deadly in him. Not the quiet rancher, but a man who'd once lived by the gun and learned to hate it. He stepped back into the night. Lock the door. Coyotes ain't the only things that wander. She closed it behind him, sliding the bolt with trembling fingers. The fire crackled low. Through the window, she could still see him standing in the yard, unmoving, hat tipped against the stars, as if listening to something the earth itself remembered. The wind carried the sound of his boots across the porch. Then nothing. Only the whisper of the plains and the low hum of a man who'd buried his past under the same dirt he called home. Eleanor sat by the window until the lamp burned out, watching the last embers fade. The punishment they'd sent her to, it had a face now. A silent man who spoke with his hands, lived with his ghosts, and stood watch in the dark like he was waiting for the world to start over again. And for the first time since she left everything behind, she wasn't sure whether she feared him, or the quiet way she didn't. The rope snapped tight as the calf kicked, dust flying up in a hot, angry swirl. Eleanor held the post steady, her arms burning, skirts streaked brown with sweat and dirt. The morning sun was cruel and white, flattening everything it touched. Luke's voice cut through the noise. Hold it steady. She did. He moved quick, calm as the wind before thunder, tying the rope with the quiet skill of a man who'd done it 1,000 times. When the calf stilled, he let out a short breath, wiped his brow, and said, "That'll do." Eleanor stepped back, chest rising fast. She'd been helping him at the ranch for nearly 3 weeks now, though the days still felt borrowed, like she was trespassing in a life that wasn't meant for her. Luke said little. He'd point, nod, work. She followed. The rhythm between them had grown into something wordless. Two exiles speaking a language made of silence and motion. A hawk screeched high above. She shaded her eyes, watching it circle the ridge, the same ridge where she'd first heard gunfire that night. Luke noticed her stare. "They're back sometimes," he said. "Ooh." He pulled the rope from the ground, coiling it tight. "Outlaws don't give up easy." The words landed heavy, like a warning, but he didn't say more. He turned toward the barn, boots sinking into the dust. Inside, the air was cooler, thick with the smell of hay and horse sweat. Eleanor followed, still gripping her gloves. "You've been watching the ridge," she said. "Every night." Luke hung the rope on a nail, jaw tight. "Ranchers watch their land. That's not all you're watching." He turned then, slow, eyes cold under the brim of his hat. "You ask too many questions." She held his gaze. "Then answer one." Silence filled the barn, thick as smoke. A horse shifted in its stall, snorting softly. Finally, he said, "There's men out there who think I owe 'em blood. I aim to make sure they stay thinking." Eleanor took a step closer. "They called you something once, didn't they?" He froze, a flicker, small but real. "I saw it," she continued, voice low, "on the old gun belt under your bed. Elsie, the Kerrigan ghost." The name hung in the air like a curse. Luke's face didn't move, but his hands clenched at his sides. "You've been snooping. I was cleaning. I didn't mean. You saw what you weren't meant to see." He turned away, reaching for a brush, scrubbing his saddle like he could scrape memory off leather. Eleanor's heart thudded. "Why hide it?" "'Cause that man's dead," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Ain't worth digging up. Yet he keeps riding out every night." The brush stilled. For a long moment, the only sound was the horse breathing. Then he said, almost to himself, "You ever try burying a storm? It don't stay buried long." The words sent a chill through her. Before she could speak, hoofbeats echoed outside, fast, uneven. Luke's hand went to his hip out of instinct. The brush dropped to the dirt. A rider came tearing down the trail, coat flapping, dust rising behind him. Sheriff Harlow. He pulled up hard by the fence, voice shouting before the horse even stopped moving. "Kerrigan, you better come hear this." Luke stepped out of the barn, Eleanor just behind him. The sheriff's face was slick with sweat. "Heard from the telegraph office. A band rode through Pine Hollow last night. 5, maybe 6 men. Asking after you." Luke didn't blink. "What did you tell them?" "Told them you were long gone, same as I always do. But they didn't believe it. So they'd pay gold to anyone who saw you." Eleanor's fingers curled tight around her gloves. "What do they want?" Harlow looked at her, then back at Luke. "Same thing outlaws always want. Revenge or a payday. You killed their kind once. They don't forget." Luke nodded once, the motion slow, heavy. "Appreciate the warning." The sheriff tipped his hat, eyes flicking to Eleanor again. "You might want to send the lady back to town. Dust Creek ain't safe with your ghost sniffing around." Eleanor stiffened. "I'm not leaving." Luke didn't answer, and that silence was louder than anything he could have said. The sheriff sighed. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." He kicked his horse, riding off in a swirl of grit. When the road quieted again, Luke turned back toward the house. Eleanor followed. "You're not really thinking about sending me away, are you?" He stopped halfway to the porch. "Wouldn't be the worst idea. Because of them. Because this place don't need another grave." Her anger flared hot. "They sent me here to punish me, Luke. I'm done running from what people think I deserve." His jaw tightened. "This ain't about punishment." "Then what is it about?" He didn't answer. He just walked inside, leaving her on the porch, the screen door slapping shut behind him. That night, the house was quiet except for the wind against the boards. Eleanor sat by the fire, mending a tear in her sleeve, her thoughts circling like buzzards. The lamp cast a small pool of light, flickering across the walls. Through the thin window, she could see him out there again, sitting on the porch, chair tilted back, revolver across his lap, watching the horizon. Always watching. The world felt still, but not peaceful, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Eleanor stood, went to the door, and stepped outside. The air smelled of dust and dry sage. The stars above were cold and endless. Luke didn't turn when she approached. "You're waiting for them," she said quietly. He spoke without looking up. "Been waiting for years." "Then let me help." His head lifted slightly. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know enough. You think I'm here because of mercy?" "They sent me here because they thought I'd break." He looked at her then, really looked. The firelight from inside caught her face. The black dress faded now to gray, hair loose around her shoulders. "You ain't broken yet," he said. "I won't be," she replied. He studied her for a long moment, then reached down, running his thumb over the revolver's worn grip. "You ever shoot?" She nodded once. "My husband taught me before he went to war. Said I had a steadier hand than he did." Luke's gaze stayed on her hand, still, unshaking in the lamplight. "Keep it that way," he said finally, standing. "Tomorrow, we start early." She frowned. "For what?" "To make sure you know how to aim when the pass comes calling it." Then he walked past her into the dark, the door creaking shut behind him. Eleanor stayed on the porch, eyes on the ridge, feeling the weight of something coming, slow and sure as the wind before rain. Inside the house, she heard the faint click of metal. Luke loading a revolver. Rain hadn't come in months, but the sky broke that night like it remembered how. Thunder rolled low across the plains, and the wind carried the smell of iron and wet earth. Horses cried out in the dark. Luke Kerrigan was already on the porch when the first lightning split the clouds. Rifle in hand, hat low, eyes fixed on the black mouth of the canyon. He'd been standing there since sundown, listening to the earth tremble under distant hooves. "They're coming," he said. Eleanor stepped out beside him, revolver tucked in her belt, her shawl whipping in the wind. She didn't ask how he knew. She could hear it too now, a deep, rolling thunder that wasn't a storm. Luke turned to her. "Cellar. Now." She didn't move. "I'm not hiding." He didn't argue, just looked at her long enough to make her heartbeat stumble. Then he checked the chamber, cocked the rifle, and said, "When the lights go out, stay low. Don't miss." The wind screamed across the ridge. Then came a sound, a gunshot, sharp and close. Luke spun, fired once into the dark, and the front window shattered behind him. "Down," he barked. Eleanor dropped behind the doorframe as glass rained across the floor. Shadows moved beyond the fence. 5, maybe 6 riders, torches glowing like the eyes of hell itself. Luke moved fast, loading, firing, shifting from window to wall. Each shot answered by another from the dark. Wood splintered. A lamp fell and shattered. Eleanor crawled to the corner, breath sharp, hands trembling but steady where it mattered. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, thick and bitter. Luke shouted, "Barn side, 2 of them." She saw movement there, caught the glint of a rifle barrel. Before she could think, she raised her revolver and fired. One of the shadows dropped. Luke looked back, surprise flickering across his face. "Good shot." "Beginner's luck," she muttered, loading again. A bullet slammed through the window frame, close enough to burn her cheek with splinters. She didn't flinch. Lightning flashed. For a moment, the whole ridge lit up. Eleanor saw their faces then. Men with bandanas, eyes bright with vengeance. The leader rode front. Thick coat, scarred down his jaw, sneer cutting through rain. Luke's voice dropped low. "Grant Malvern." The name tasted like old blood. Luke stepped out from behind the post and fired. Malvern's men scattered, one torch falling into the mud. "Get inside," Malvern roared. "Bring me Kerrigan's ghost." They came hard. Luke grabbed Eleanor by the wrist, pulling her toward the kitchen door. "Back way." She followed him through the narrow hall, feet slipping on the wood. Another round tore through the wall beside her head. She ducked. They burst into the back room, the door swinging open into cold rain. The horses screamed from the stable, trapped, terrified. Luke tossed her a spare revolver. "You see anyone comes through that door, you shoot. Don't wait." She nodded, wiping rain from her face. "What about you?" He pumped the rifle once. "I'll be their ghost again." Then he was gone. Eleanor stood by the door, breath shaking, revolvers heavy in her hands. Lightning flashed again, revealing her reflection in the glass. Mud-streaked, wild-eyed, a woman who no longer looked like someone sent away in shame. Outside, gunfire cracked in the storm. Shouts. The clash of boots in mud. She pressed herself to the wall, peeking through the boards. Luke moved like smoke, slipping between cover, his rifle spitting fire and thunder. Every shot landed. Men screamed and fell, but there were too many. She saw one of them circle behind the barn, gun raised. "Luke!" she shouted too late. The outlaw fired. Luke stumbled, dropping to one knee, clutching his shoulder. Eleanor didn't think. She stepped out into the rain, raised both guns, and fired until the hammer clicked empty. The outlaw spun and dropped face first into the mud. The air went still except for rain and thunder. Luke looked up at her, soaked, bleeding, but still standing. "Told you to stay inside," he said, half a growl, half a breath. She reloaded with shaking hands. "You told me not to miss." He gave her a look that was almost a smile. Then Malvern's voice boomed through the storm. "Kerrigan, you still breathing, old man?" Luke turned toward the sound. "Been a long time, Malvern." "Too long," Malvern spat. "You left me for dead at Perdition Creek. Should have stayed that way." Lightning split the sky again, and in that flash, Eleanor saw Malvern standing at the ridge's edge, revolver in hand, eyes burning with the madness of men who've lived too long with hate. "Come out and face me," he roared. Luke started forward, but Eleanor grabbed his arm. "You're hurt." He pulled free, wincing. "He won't stop till one of us in the ground." Then let me. He turned to her, face hard. No. But she was already stepping into the rain, revolver drawn, her black dress clinging to her legs like shadow. You've buried enough ghosts, Luke. Let me bury mine. He watched her walk toward the ridge, lightning throwing her silhouette against the storm. A widow in black, unshaken, unstoppable. Malvern laughed when he saw her. They sent a woman to finish the job? Ain't that a joke? Laugh while you can, she said. He lifted his gun. You ain't Kerrigan. No, she said softly. I'm the one who learned from him. He fired first. She didn't duck. Her arm moved smooth, sure. One shot, straight through the storm. Malvern's gun fell from his hand. His knees hit the mud before he did. The sound of rain swallowed everything. Eleanor lowered her weapon slowly, smoke curling from the barrel. For a long moment, she just stood there, letting the storm wash the blood and dirt from her skin. Luke limped up beside her, rain running down his face, eyes wide in something between disbelief and pride. You saved us, he said quietly. She looked out across the ridge where the bodies lay still. No, she said. You taught me to save myself. He stared at her, then nodded once. A man who understood something sacred had shifted. Thunder rolled again, but softer now, fading toward the horizon. The rain began to slow. The sky cracked open, letting dawn leak through. Eleanor holstered the revolver, breath unsteady, eyes on the pale line of sun rising over the ridge. Storm's over, she whispered. Luke followed her gaze. For now, behind them, the ranch smoldered, smoke curling from broken windows, mud streaked with the memory of violence. But the wind had changed. The land smelled new again. The first bullet missed his head by an inch. The second shattered the whiskey bottle beside him. Caleb ducked behind the corral fence, the board splintering under another round. Smoke from the burning barn rolled across the ranch, turning the evening into a hellish storm of fire and dust. Get her inside, someone shouted through the chaos. But she was already gone. Eliza came out of the flames like a figure carved from ash and steel. Her black dress had burned to rags, sleeves torn, eyes glowing against the firelight. In her hand, the shotgun gleamed like a blade. Her steps made no sound against the dirt, only the low creak of her boots and the sound of shells sliding into place. Stay down, Caleb, she said, her voice steady as iron. They came for me. Let me end it. 3 riders thundered toward them, their coats whipping in the wind, bandanas hiding faces that had come to claim the ranch and finish the woman they'd once left for dead. The leader, Beck Talon, laughed when he saw her standing in the smoke. Well, he drawled, drawing his pistol. The widow's still breathing. Guess we'll fix that. Eliza raised her shotgun. The first blast echoed like thunder across the canyon. Beck's horse reared. He toppled into the dirt, clutching his chest. The second shot dropped the man behind him before he could even draw. The third man hesitated, then fired wild. The bullet grazed her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She walked straight through the smoke, reloaded, and leveled the barrel with the calm of someone who'd already died once. Caleb shouted her name. She didn't answer. The shotgun roared again, and silence fell. Only the crackle of burning would fill the air. Caleb ran to her. You're hit, he said, catching her as she swayed. Blood soaked her sleeve, dark against the gray dust. It's nothing, she said, though her face had gone pale. They won't hurt no one again. He looked at the men lying in the dirt. The men who'd torched his barn, poisoned his well, stolen his cattle. The same men who had once dragged Eliza's husband into the street and shot him like a dog. How do you know they'd come? He asked. She looked toward the fire, her expression unreadable. Because I sent for them. Caleb froze. I knew they'd come for what they thought was theirs, she continued. Men like them don't forget what they lost. Land, power, pride. They think they can take it back. She looked at him then, eyes shining like embers. But they don't understand what loss does to a woman. She turned, limping toward the burning barn, with the flames reflected off her pale face like sunlight through whiskey glass. Help me with the horses, she said. They earned better than this. He followed, silent, as the two moved through the blaze. The horses screamed in panic, eyes rolling white. Eliza's voice softened when she spoke to them. a strange calm in the chaos. She freed each one, guiding them out through the smoke, her hand steady even as the rafters groaned and collapsed around them. When the last horse broke into the open field, Caleb pulled her away just as the roof caved in. They fell together into the dust, coughing, shaking. The fire roared behind them, swallowing the barn hole. She looked back once, tears streaking through soot. That was his, she said softly. The last piece of him. Caleb watched the fire die down, the orange glow fading into the deep blue of twilight. Then it's time to start something new, he said. Eliza didn't answer. She stood slowly, dusting off her hands, watching the smoke drift toward the horizon. The land stretched before them, endless and raw, the kind of land that never gave, only tested. Then, faintly, came the sound of hooves in the distance. More riders. Caleb stiffened, grabbing his rifle. There's more of them. Eliza's eyes narrowed. No, she said. They're coming to see what became of the talents. As the riders came closer, torches flickering, they saw the truth. The bodies in the dirt, the ashes of the barn, the widow standing tall with a shotgun across her arm. One of the men dismounted and removed his hat. Ma'am, he said quietly. Word was, you were dead. Eliza gave a faint smile. Word was wrong. He nodded once, eyes wide with respect. Then I reckon this land's yours now. She looked toward Caleb. The firelight caught his face, the same man who had been forced to take her in as punishment, and yet had become her only ally. Ours, she corrected softly. And in that moment, with the smoke curling toward the stars and the scent of burned wood drifting across the range, something old and unbreakable settled over the land. The kind of legend men would whisper in saloons for years to come. They'd say there was a woman once, a widow sent away like a curse, who walked through fire and came out forged in it, who turned a rancher's punishment into a kingdom built from ashes. And when they spoke of her name, they'd lower their voices like a prayer half remembered and half feared.